Hi everyone, my name's Ellie Duncan and I'm here today with Dominic Smithies, who's part of Student Minds UK. Dominic, would you like to tell us a bit about Student Minds and what it is you guys do?
So Student Minds is the UK's student mental health charity. So we work across all the nations of the UK to support the higher education community in transforming the state of student mental health. Briefly, how we're achieving that is the much bigger question, and we approach this through working at a grassroots level with students to be transforming change in their local communities, at their institutions, as well as training and equipping students with their knowledge, confidence, and skills to understand mental health so they can look after themselves, look after others, all the way through to working with institutions on a range of projects and programs to improve their practice and their policies in supporting students through their time at university. And we've got a range of resources and policy work that helps us to achieve all of that, which I'm sure I'll go into soon enough, so I won't just waffle on now.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like great stuff. So obviously with in the SMaRteN network, we're very concerned about the state of student mental health, and we're trying to dig into what it is exactly that is causing such a kind of decrease in students' well-being when they get to university. What do you think some of the biggest factors are in students developing mental health issues at university?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I suppose the first thing that has to be acknowledged is there is um, quite a dearth of evidence when it comes to looking specifically at the student population compared to just the young population
Yeah.
broadly. Obviously, not all students fit into kind of their 18 to 21, 25 age bracket, but most of them do. We know with that young population, it overlaps with the age of onset for developing mental health conditions generally. So there is a degree to which how much we're looking at youth mental health broadly, but also looking at what is unique in the student experience that does contribute to potentially developing mental health difficulties. And we know there are a range of factors that can contribute to struggling with your mental health across all populations that can be, I suppose, exacerbated through the student experience. So being a student just naturally comes with a lot of transitions, which can be challenging. So you're leaving your home, your usual support networks of your friends and family for the first time. You're adjusting to a new environment, adjusting to being independent, suddenly having a lot of control over your own sleep, your own diet, your own workloads, which can be really great, can be really empowering, but can also be really, really stressful if you're not equipped to deal with that well. So generally, transition points are always, I suppose, a risk to focus on. And that happens throughout the student experience. So it's not just the first years going into university, but suddenly going into second year when suddenly everything counts and you've got the academic pressures starting to build up all the way through to your final years at university, where you're suddenly stressing about, okay, what do I do after university? I'm not graduating soon. I need to think about a job and applying for all these graduate schemes and or further study. It's lots of stress and transition points all the way through the experience. And on top of that, you've got students experiencing financial pressures with obviously rising costs of rent, and how much maintenance loans covers things, and how much students need to work part-time to support the cost of living so that they, I suppose, can live the lifestyles they want to be living. Hopefully a healthy lifestyle, but if they're unable to get part-time work, especially as we've seen during the pandemic at the moment, with so many students being affected who are in hospitality, it can be a huge source of stress if they're struggling with finances. And I'll stop waffling there again. I could go on for ages. I could just rattle off a list, but I'll
It's a lot,
refrain
isn't
myself.
there? Yeah, it's a really turbulent time at university. It really is. You mentioned pandemic in terms of finances. Do you think that's been the kind of the main way in which, obviously 2020 has been a very stressful year in a lot of ways, but for students specifically, the financial side of things, or do you think there are other ways that's exacerbated mental health issues?
No, it definitely has exacerbated across a lot of areas, and I suppose the financial stress caused by the pandemic isn't unique to students, but I think it definitely is heightened within the student population. So we know obviously the majority of the student population, the most recent statistic I saw was about 52%. So over half of students do work part-time, and the vast majority of students working to support themselves while they're studying are working in the hospitality industries, which obviously are the ones that have been mostly impacted by the pandemic, just because of how much it's closed during various lockdowns and how much hospitality has been able to adapt or not. It's been quite a struggle, but no, there's so much more. So we've seen students, particularly first years, transitioning into university because they're having to study in halls. Their ability to interact and make social connections outside of their halls with course mates or through societies has been limited, and this can impact, I suppose, loneliness and isolation. But there have been great things being done by universities and student unions to still try and build that sense of community and give students opportunities to mingle. But it has to be acknowledged that loneliness and isolation is just a huge concern right now, and the pandemic plays a huge part in that. Not that it wasn't a concern before, it's just another one of those things that has been, I suppose, highlighted by the challenges in the pandemic and exacerbated. We know there have been struggles for some students in adapting to online teaching, and it's been obviously a huge stress and a huge piece of work for universities and staff to transition to delivering online, and they have to be commended for how quickly they did turn that round in the middle of the academic year. But it also has to be noted that online learning isn't what a lot of students signed up for. It's not suited to everyone's preferred learning styles, so there are going to be some students that are going to struggle with that. But also on the flip side, there are actually probably some students who are actually potentially loving this new way of learning and this new structure, and it potentially suits some people. So with everything, there's always pros and cons. But there's also just the general, obviously, the pandemic itself, the health anxiety and the actual worries, and the actually getting ill with coronavirus has obviously affected a lot of the student population, particularly when students were moving all across the country when they were going home and when they were coming to uni. I mean, again, tremendous amounts of work done by institutions and lots of processes put in place to try and minimize that impact and to try and do it as safely as possible. But obviously there were lots of students that were getting ill. There were a lot of feelings about worries about getting ill, almost to a degree. The worry about the inevitability of getting coronavirus was as much of a source of stress as actually having coronavirus for some students. So yeah, a range of things being a cause of stress for students throughout the pandemic, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think, pandemic aside, the main worries are in terms of like the main issues that students can develop at university? Is it high levels of depression, high levels of anxiety, or is it less clear cut than that?
Yeah, no, I mean, going into particular difficulties, I suppose we do know anxiety and depression are more represented, and it has been, I think, increasing with anxiety, particularly in young women, looking at population data over the last few years, and with students obviously being caught up in that population. So absolutely, but there's you also have to acknowledge all the other range of difficulties that are getting, I suppose, less attention. And I suppose we often talk about the concept of things being widely felt and deeply felt. So while it is important to recognise and focus on lots of issues that are affecting a large population of students, so anxiety and depression being, I don't want to say common, more prevalent, it's important to look at those, look at the risk factors, look at the protective factors, to think about what we can be doing, what students can be doing themselves, what institutions and student unions can be doing. But it's also important to be thinking about the range of other difficulties. So schizophrenia, bipolar, I'm not just going to list them all, but obviously they will affect portions of the student population as well, and making sure that there's comprehensive, robust, accessible support in place for students with the whole range of challenges is really important. And a huge key factor in that is making sure that there's a whole university approach in supporting students. So thinking about how universities are linked up with local support services, NHS, third sector, thinking about how there are escalation and good signposting procedures with academics and staff on the front line who might interact with students more. Think about how students are supported and empowered to understand their own mental health and identify challenges amongst their peers so they can signpost on and support them in a healthy way as well. It's important to think about the broad view of how universities can be supporting students with a wide range of needs, I think, and in tackling all of the issues.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, you have a real spectrum there in terms of what mental health issues means. You got very kind of low-lying. So, for instance, maybe like anxiety that isn't necessarily an anxiety disorder, but obviously a lot of students have a lot of anxious feelings at university, all the way to very highly stigmatized conditions like bipolar and schizophrenia disorders. So there's a really wide spectrum there to cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that universities have enough in place at the moment to tackle those issues, or have they got like the right approach there? Maybe is a better question.
Oh, good question. Obviously, that's a broad question, and it's hard to homogenize every institution across the UK when so many have taken different approaches, and
Yes,
I suppose at different points in their journeys of reflecting on and improving their support processes for students. But I think I can confidently say that for the absolute vast majority of institutions across the UK, things have been improving for how they're reviewing their policies, their procedures, their support systems, what they've got in place for looking after students, and how they think about mental health strategically. So not just thinking about, okay, support services, are there staff in it? Good, students can go there. But again, thinking about that whole university approach, it's, I mean, just in the last decade, I think how far the sector has come in responding to and addressing challenges of mental health has been commendable, really. But also not to put a down on how much work there is still to do. We do still need to do a lot more to understand the particularly unique challenges of, I suppose, the various different student communities within the student population. So I do a lot of work trying to understand health inequalities, so how different student populations, so LGBTQ, men, women, the BAME community, what their particular unique risk factors are and what protective factors are, so we know, well, what in the university experience is particularly difficult for them, and what can universities be doing to support those groups and those communities especially. So making sure universities have a really intersectional approach to their the way they're dealing with mental health is also really important, and something I'd like to see a lot of universities pushing for and developing even more in the years to come. So without commenting, I'm not going to comment on obviously any particular institution or try and homogenize them all. I'm feeling positive about the journey we've been on, and we are going in with the sector's approach to mental health. If things continue to go the way they're going, I'm optimistic, but I don't think we should lose sight of the fact there's still so much more that needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, hopeful, but not quite ideal yet. No, fair enough. So what would you advise for students to help themselves, help their friends, if they are or people they know are going through a tough time with mental health, especially right now when it's a little bit more remote now, a little bit more difficult to meet up. And then with that, what does Student Minds have available right now that people could be getting involved with? That's a lot of things lumped into one. I apologize.
I'll do my best to answer it all. Good question. So students, I suppose, I always like to break it down into two. So it's looking after yourself and looking after your peers. I think while they're separate points, I think a lot of the messages do remain the same. With first and foremost, I think it is often about checking in, identifying any challenges or issues. If you have concerns, voicing them, and kind of being confident enough to talk about them if someone's experiencing challenges, or if you reflect on yourself that you think you're struggling and not as healthy as you usually are, your behaviour's starting to shift. So check in with yourself, check in with your friends, ask them how they are. Just be available to them and be a space for them if you feel comfortable doing so. Just to be a listening ear and to connect. I mean, we're social creatures ultimately, and I think the connection and just the empathizing is often one of the most valuable things you can do when someone is struggling, and it can be a really valuable and important step in getting someone, if they need lots of support on that journey to getting it. If you are just available to them, to listen to them, give them the space to talk about what's troubling them, what's concerning them, what's on their mind, and also then encouraging them, if you don't feel equipped to be supporting them, or I suppose dealing with any of the problems they might be experiencing yourself, to be encouraging them to reach out to support. So knowing what support is available for yourself and for your friends is kind of the next step, so you can signpost effectively, which segues me quite nicely onto the next bit of your question, which is thinking about what's available to students. Thank you. So obviously make sure that you do go on the university's website to understand all of the services that are available through your institution, check out university support services. They should have a range of different things, and probably resources on their own websites as well. Make sure you've got a sense of what's available for you in the local community, be registered with the NHS, check out IAP services if you need to. And obviously the challenge of just making sure you're equipped to know about all those services, both where you're studying and back home for periods when you're on holiday, because I know some of the gaps that students can fall through is not knowing where to go for support when they're on a break. So do look at what your university is offering while you're away from campus, away from your institution over the holidays. Do look at NHS provision when you're back home. You should be able to still access, even if you're not registered there, if there is an emergent need. And then it's things like looking at national resources and national support services, often that are provided by the third sector, that are available to students, to young people, to anyone nationally, be that finding apps that work for you, connecting on forums, online forums, to get support from people who are going through similar lived experiences, or reading blogs or writing blogs, sharing your own experience and your own story to, I suppose, get it off your chest if you just want to share what's going on with others, and hopefully for other people to make use of and to relate to. So we have quite a few resources available on our website on Student Minds, quite a few resources talking about lots of things students experience, from exam stress, making friends, how to support a friend I'm worried is struggling, all of that. And since the summer, we also launched Student Space, which is a huge hub of a range of resources, from blogs and written content and videos through to some support services that we've commissioned. So there's a phone line, a text line, and that's all available to students 24/7, even throughout the holidays. So students can know that there's always going to be something available to them that they can access. Because I know one of the main barriers for students when supporting others, their main worry is, well, I want to be able to signpost, but I'm worried that if I signpost them, where I'm signposting them to might not have the capacity to support. And you don't want to signpost someone to somewhere and it not be picked up. I know there's lots of conversations around waiting times. That's such a huge issue. But just to reassure students that there are national resources, Student Space, for example, that are available to students now. So there's always something that is available, and I think that's really important to recognise, even if it's just something that students are accessing to tide them over until more professional support can be available, or if they want to just use it as additional support and professional support they're accessing, or maybe they don't actually need that specialised professional support, and just that bit of support will be all they need to deal with whatever they're experiencing. So there's lots available, lots to look at. talk to staff in your university, they should be able to point you in the right direction. Do a bit of Googling. There's lots of stuff out there, so just do explore.
Yeah. And if people wanted to get involved in Student Minds in a kind of, I know you guys do volunteering and things like that, how would you, what's available there for people wanting to help out more?
Yeah, great question. So we have a page on our website, a Get Involved hub, that kind of lists all the opportunities. Quite a lot of them come and go over the course of the year, so it's quite hard to point people to a general catch-all. So for example, for quite a few of our projects, student voice and co-production are really core parts of how we work at Student Minds. It's incredibly valuable. We recognise the importance of putting student voice at the centre of everything we do. So for pretty much all of our projects that are going to be affecting or impacting students in some way or another, probably have student panels assigned to those programs. So the University Mental Health Charter, for example, had a dedicated student panel. We're working on a project around international students' mental health as well, with quite a few project partners through OFS funding. And we've got an international student panel dedicated to that, to make sure their voices are being heard and utilised, and their experiences are going to be captured in a way that we can learn from them, get best practice, understand what the challenges were, understand what worked for them. So generally, if you're interested, there's quite a few ways you can get involved. So if you want to blog for us, if you want to be a peer supporter, if you want to fundraise for us, if you want to be involved in any of our programs, if you want to be a contact for press opportunities. So we often get asked to try and platform student voice for lots of press. So if you're wanting to share your experience in that kind of way, we can help link you up with opportunities that come up. A whole range of ways. Do just check out our website, keep an eye on it, sign up to our newsletter for updates on when new opportunities become available, because so many things. I can't predict what we're going to do next year. If you asked me what I'd be doing in 2020 last year, I would not have called it.
So true.
So yeah, there's always new opportunities that we're creating. We're keen to have students involved, so keep an eye.
Great. Oh, thanks so much, Dominic. It's been great to chat. I'm sure attached to this interview will be links to the things we've talked about. So people watching this, if you want to get involved with Student Minds, then click on those and have a great day.